What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/NuclearRevenge. This story's called Favorite Teacher Gets Wrongfully Fired, So I Get 3/4 of the Staff Arrested. I'll start off by saying this happened to my sister, and the actions taken were hers. My sister has always gotten along very well with her teachers, and has a habit of forming actual friendships with them, to the point that she still talks to her 5th grade English teacher, along with many others decades later. This happened about 15 years ago. My sister was a student at Job Corps, a government-run live-on-campus vocational training program, studying hotel-motel management. She got on extremely well with her hotel-motel management teacher, better than pretty much every teacher she'd already had up to that point. One day, the teacher goes to the center's dean's office and walks in on a paper shredding session. It turned out that there was some pretty major embezzling happening at the center, as in, more than 60% of the funds for the center were being stolen. The teacher was appalled, and despite some rather lucrative offers made, refused to join in on these acts. Less than a week later, the teacher was fired for trumped-up reasons. This was especially bad given the teacher was only 2 years away from retiring, and being fired lost their retirement package. Needless to say, my sister was pissed. Knowing how things typically work, and that almost any report she tried to make would just be swept under the rug if it was taken seriously at all, she came up with a plan and took things nuclear. Over the next month or two, my sister managed to gather some basic evidence of the embezzling. Nothing concrete, but enough to warrant considerable investigation by the authorities. She took the little evidence she was able to gather, along with the story of what happened to her teacher, and sent the info in an email to the Job Corps regional director. Now, like I said, she knew that her email would likely be ignored, or the event swept under the rug, so she got smart. The email was CC'd to every single major person in the Job Corps chain of command, all the way up to the national director, as well as to anyone even tangentially related to Job Corps in the upper echelons of the Department of Labor, and every member of Congress, as well as the US President's office. Remember, this was a government-run program. All in all, the email was sent to over 2,000 people. Basically, she not only sent the report, but sent it in such a way that everyone who got it could also see everyone else who got it. And she sent it to way more people than would be needed to ensure the issue couldn't be swept under the rug. 2 weeks later, after the investigation finished, never seen the government work so fast on anything that wasn't collecting owed taxes. Only 5 or 6 staff members out of 20-ish that worked in the center still had their jobs, and at least 5 of the ones fired, including the dean, were facing major criminal charges, with the rest facing minor charges. I'm not sure of the exact figure on how much was stolen, but it was well into the 7 digits. The embezzling had been happening for years. The teacher got a very nice severance package post-investigation. If I recall correctly, it was 3 years of pay, her full retirement package, and signing an NDA. Though she didn't get her job back, and my sister was given her completion certificate despite not having finished the requirements of the course. They wanted her gone, but couldn't kick her out. Wow, what a badass your sister is. And also, you gotta appreciate the integrity that the teacher had. And that's so cool. I love the fact that she's still friends with her teachers after that many years. Makes me want to contact my old teachers that I was pretty cool with, because my teachers were pretty great growing up. This story's called She Didn't Give Me My Money Back, So I Ruined Her Life. I don't know if this is the right sub, but here we go. I am male, 20, strongly believed in individualism and equality, currently in university. Geeta, let's go Geeta, because that's an Indian name and I'm familiar with Indian names, is probably under 24 and a clerk in a government bank. A good accomplishment for her name is Indian. Geeta. A good accomplishment for middle-class Indians. We both are neighbors, live with our parents. It is normal and sort of compulsory in India, especially in small towns. We are neighbors for around 8 years. Our parents have okay relations with each other, and I have a good relation with her parents and an okay relation with Geeta. We both are lower economical middle class and socially from the upper caste. See caste in India. Both our parents are liberal in an Indian sense, but in Western standards, they are very conservative. You can say this for a majority of Indian parents. February 2019, I had to deposit 8,000 Indian rupees, or 112 US dollars. It is a large amount for lower middle class Indians, in the bank. I am sort of lazy and didn't want to wait in queues in the bank. Also, Guido is in the same bank, so I thought I'll give her the money and she will deposit that in my account. I went to her house at 7 a.m. and called for her mother. She opened the gates. It turned out that her elder brother, 28, and her mother and father went to temple. I told her why I came. She accepted the money and told me that she would keep the hard cash and will transfer the money from her account the next day. 2 weeks later, money was still not deposited. I asked her about this several times, mainly from WhatsApp, but she just made excuses. At last, after 3 weeks, I went to her house and asked her to give the money instantly. I threatened her that I will tell her parents. After hearing that, she said this:
"What proof do you have that you gave me the money? Ask for money again and I will tell everybody that you are sexually harassing me."
That was it. I became stiff as stone. My whole body became too heavy suddenly. I really had no proof, and I had WhatsApped her several times saying money hadn't been deposited yet, or when will you deposit the money? Now, before any of you Western folks say that I exaggerated the situation, have to view the situation through an innocent Indian person. India is basically Middle East in terms of sex, personal space, and sexism. Google two-finger test in India. Also, legally, men can't be violated. But unlike Middle East, it hides this fact through white lies. India has a violation problem, and this is one of the reasons of false accusation problems too. I have heard many false sexual harassment and violation accusation cases, and I've personally seen my distant rich cousin assault his neighbor due to a land dispute violently. He simply used his beautiful clerk to charge him with a false sexual harassment case. That case ended with the neighbor being in jail for some time. Both my cousin and his neighbor had to bribe the police. June 2019. I hadn't talked to her again, but after that, I had a plan to revenge her. By this time, I had spied her a bit and found out that she buys alcohol every alternate Sunday from X place and drink it in her friend's place. Drinking alcohol is seen as immoral in the male population and 10 times immoral in female population in India. Also, she had a boyfriend, under 25, with whom she'd spend half an hour every Saturday's evening at X Park, which is on the other side of the town. Having a boyfriend or girlfriend is seen as immoral in India, and you won't ever get rental flats easily if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend. I clicked her photos, both with her boyfriend and buying alcohol. First Saturday, July 2019. That day on my way to the park, I found a police SUV a mile away from the park. I thought maybe it's time to get this plan a step further. I told them that a couple is doing an obscene act in the X Park. The police officer replied in a very rude language. I knew I had to pay him, so I gave him 2,000 Indian rupees and he agreed to go. The park Geeta used to go to was famous for unmarried couples, so in every Valentine's Day, the police used to harass the couples there. On reaching there, I told him the spot and began to watch the situation from a distance. I wasn't able to hear them, but the view was clear. Geeta and her boyfriend were neither kissing nor hugging. They were just talking on the bench at that time. The police arrived and told them something. After that, the police slapped Geeta's boyfriend a few times immediately. It appeared that her boyfriend refused to give his parents' number. In India, if a police officer caught an under 30 unmarried couple, then they demand the victim's parents' numbers. The whole drama went on for 20 minutes. Both even fall to the police's feet. At last, they had to give some money to the police. This police behavior is pretty normal in India. Both looked pretty terrified that day. First Sunday, July 2019. I had already printed out all the images in 10 groups because there are 10 main houses in the neighborhood, including mine. In each set, there were 3 images of her buying alcohol and 4 images of her and her boyfriend together. I woke up at 4 a.m. and put all the 1 sets of pictures in front of the 10 houses and went to sleep. I woke up to loud noises from Gita's house. I had put 1 set in front of my own house too. I'm pretty sure her brother slapped her a few times. Her mother was calling her bad names like Randy, Hindi word for whore. Her father was not in the house that day. I asked my mother about the situation and she told me to stay away from Gita. She told that Gita had shamed the whole society with her childish behavior. 1st August 2019. In the last month, she was forced to stay in the house by her parents. The whole neighborhood was disgusted by her, and her parents also charged a blackmailing case on Gita's boyfriend, which caused her boyfriend to spend a few days in jail, but he was released after a week. Her parents also tried to arrange a marriage for her. It turned out that her boyfriend was from lower caste, which fueled the rage even more. She also needed a stitch in her lips because her boyfriend literally cut her upper lips in half. 15 September 2019. She'll be married in the next year. She had started going to the bank again. I still haven't gotten the money. Wow. Okay. Now I know this is Nuclear Revenge, and she did do wrong. And there is absolutely no way in hell he didn't know how bad this could have gone if he did what he did. I definitely do not approve of anybody's actions here. But damn, did he go nuclear. Alright, this story's called You Were Never My Dad. Back in the mid-90s, my sister got knocked up by a guy. She was 17, he was 18. I despised the guy with pretty much every fiber of my being. My mom decided, however, that a baby should know their father, so she invited him to come live in our house without telling me. Took me a week to calm down enough so that when I eventually came back, I didn't punch him when I walked in the door. John was a piece of crap. Great artistic talent, but all he did all day was sit out in the garage and do prison tats for people, in addition to stealing mine and my deceased father's power tools and pawning them for a few bucks so he could get some cigarettes. I worked a full-time job and went to school, so I would be gone 12 to 14 hours a day, but it felt like I was pulling into the driveway of a frat house with a dozen or so people drinking and partying in the garage until I had to leave in the morning. I slowly curtailed that crap by being a giant pain in the ass to all the guests by having their cars towed or their wheels inexplicably slashed. By the time my nephew was 2, I'd managed to put a stop to the 24-hour party zone, but people would still congregate on Saturdays. A few months later, I'd had enough and threw John to the curb. My sister's friends all came forward to tell her about how he'd hit on all of them and probably slept with half of them, plus some other skanks he'd meet, all the while professing his devotion to my sister and their child. After I'd thrown him out, John disappeared for 8 years. No idea where, and I really didn't care. Then came a court summons for a custody hearing. John was suing for custody. However, in the 8 years since he disappeared, my sister had met a guy and they'd gotten married. My nephew was formally adopted by his stepdad and changed his legal name. The first hearing was dismissed because the allegations made as the basis for the custody hearing were investigated by CPS and decided as having no substance in fact. Nephew wasn't beaten, abused, or neglected. House wasn't a disaster and in danger of falling apart, nor was it a health threat. Every few months, John would file another custody hearing request until it finally got a date. John made a number of allegations, all of which were disproven by documentation and fact. Finally, the judge decided he'd had enough and called my 10-year-old nephew and asked him who he wanted to live with.
I don't know him. He walked out of my life when I was 2. He's not my dad. Stepdad is my dad. And he, John, will never be my dad. And I don't ever want to see him again.
The judge ruled against John and dismissed his custody request with prejudice. When I looked at John, he was sobbing in his chair as his mother comforted him. I sneered at him and flipped him off as I walked out of the courtroom. As to why John was missing for 8 years, apparently he'd been committed to a mental facility in Tennessee. And when he got out years later, he went on SSI disability and then plotted various ways to hurt me, my sister, and my mom once he got out. He'd called CPS on us, made a number of anonymous complaints about drugs and guns, and even called the fire department a time or two. The custody hearing was meant to be the culminating event, but fortunately John was an idiot. it, and we had enough money to hire a good attorney. A few years later, John tried to mend some fences with my nephew and invited him to come down to where he lived and meet his relatives, including a half-brother my nephew didn't even know he had. My nephew also has a half-sister, but her mother deliberately excluded John from the birth certificate. This is in addition to the half-brother and sister he has from his mom and adoptive father. Needless to say, my nephew was not terribly impressed by his relatives. Now, my nephew and brother-in-law are some serious rednecks. They both love guns, hunting, camping out, and generally living the redneck lifestyle. But apparently John and his family took it to some serious extremes. There's a photo I saw one time on the internet with some guy sitting on a toilet on his front porch, and I imagine John and his extended family live something like that. Only seriously and not done as an internet joke. Considering the area, I would not be surprised. When my nephew was 15, almost 16, we received a call that John was dead. Someone had put a gun to the back of his head and blown his brains out as he sat on the couch in his mobile home. I felt sorry for John's girlfriend and her son, who found him, but for John, I didn't feel a thing. A journalist tracked my nephew down a few months later and filled us in on some details. Apparently, John had been killed as the result of a murder-for-hire plot. We learned through our own sources that John had been dealing drugs and unknowingly moved into someone else's territory. The would-be drug kingpin paid a guy a few $100 and the promise of an ATV to kill John. Typical redneck retribution, I guess. The journalist asked my nephew for a quote. "Sure, I wish I could meet the man who killed him."
Why's that?
The journalist asked. "So I could shake his hand. John was never my dad, and I won't miss him." Just goes to show, guys, don't abandon your children, otherwise you might end up dead in your trailer park home as a result of a drug feud, and your son will be happy about it.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.